the most important definitions of assimilation and sort of the relevance here. So, definition 1 is that assimilation is the process of taking in and fully understanding information and ideas. Definition 2 is the absorption and integration of people, ideas, and culture into a wider society, both of which I think are rather relevant to the usage of artificial intelligence and where that might lead to in the future. So I'm going to start off with this idea of what does it mean to be human. I think how we define humanity and what we define our value as is very important as to sort of how we discuss our usage of artificial intelligence and its kind of relevance to us as humans. So human value and how we define that, I think, is incredibly important and key to how we look at anything to do with artificial intelligence. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this presentation. So we value ourselves and each other inherently and internally. This is something that just by existing as a human, we all kind of have in us a sense of value of each other and ourselves. And I personally believe that the state of the universe will never change our inherent and internal sets of values. Individually, we value things differently, whether we're valuing money and power or love and happiness. But they're all human concepts fundamentally, and that's worth noting. And our sense of place and sense of self is all inherently human. So with talking about being human, we also have to talk about our desires, what we want to do while we're here and existing. So kudos, we as humans, we want to be recognized and we want to fit in with our community. We want people to accept us, respect us, and remember the work that we've done. We work for other people to give us the pat on the back and say, well done, I like what you've worked on. For self-improvement, the expansion of knowledge and our ability to learn is how many of us define ourselves. I sort of personally am always thinking about how I can get more information and do more with what I've got accessible to me. And there's a benefit to our humanity through learning new skills and imparting that knowledge onto others. We feel good being able to educate and teach, and in the same way we also feel good being able to learn and find new ways to interact with the world around us. And in this, AI is a really fantastic opportunity to kind of accomplish these human elements. At the end of the day, we just want to make cool shit, So, moving towards a more sort of negative perspective for a minute here, with the fears of artificial intelligence. So, as I mentioned earlier, human value is still relative to the individual as much as it's inherent to all of us. But AI can only do harm that humans already intend. Threats only exist because we exist. A recent example was with some social media influencers. There's been some controversies around the usage of deepfaking, where some explicit imagery using the identities of some of these social media influencers has caused quite a shock and outrage amongst the larger community. But as much as it's a negative issue, the issue itself would occur with or without artificial intelligence. People would be photoshopping similar imagery. There's other ways for people to cause harm without artificial intelligence. So it's an area where there can be and has been damage, but at the end of the day, it's because humans want to do the damage, not because the AI is a problem. Further, so we've got humans already devalue their opposition. We've seen that with historic events like the Crusades and some of the events currently with Russia and Ukraine, which have been pretty extreme. And there's this notion of tribalism and self-preservation. So a lot of the issues that we've seen as far as artists in the community arguing against artificial intelligence, some topics, for example, talking about how artificial intelligence is stealing artworks and things. There's a lot of sort of immediate uproar from people where it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the topic, and not necessarily one that's had a bit more in-depth understanding of all of the surrounding features of it. And this tribalism is sort of mirrored quite strongly in the online debate between people who are pro and anti-AI. And I'm going to talk a little bit here about this idea of sentience and the meaning of life, just because when we're talking about artificial intelligence, a lot of the times debates will lead to further in the future, where will artificial intelligence be? Will it take over everything? Will we get kind of a Skynet, Terminator-style reality where we're just trapped by this overarching and all-powerful artificial intelligence? So this idea of being created in God's image, right? If the sensors, calculations, and outputs of an artificial intelligence, right? So what data that we feed in, what it can kind of understand of the world, and how it processes all of that information. If that's exactly the same process as us as humans, so eventually if we can map how we see the world, what's the difference then between a human and an AI? We're essentially creating artificial intelligence in our own image. And there's this kind of idea of the soul being undefinable, and if we have a soul, what does that mean? If we don't, then I think that there's fundamentally zero difference between a late-stage artificial intelligence that has all of these kind of same processes as we as humans do. And I think that's just kind of worth thinking about. So to get a bit more specific on artificial intelligence here and less philosophical, artificial intelligence is ubiquitous, right? It's omnipresent in the industry. So essentially, AI is everywhere, and it's assisting in everything, and it has been for years. The recent sort of surge in artificial intelligence, particularly in the usage in media and with something like ChatGPT, for example, are much more sort of a public and accessible usage of artificial intelligence. And that's why it's kind of had this almost public renaissance where everyone's getting access to and playing around with some of the technology. But here's sort of a non-exhaustive list of some examples of where, even in the last sort of 15, 20 years, but more so in the last sort of decade, artificial intelligence is being used. So we've got industries such as agriculture and farming, retail, shopping and fashion. So in that kind of retail space, a lot of it is using user data and processing. So if you've got like a large group of people who purchase products through your store, you can take that information and see in an artificial intelligence, give it all of that info, and it will give you outputs such as which products are doing well, what kind of trends and the different styles of products that are really successful. So there's a lot of big data analytics kind of things that are very helpful for someone to better understand the data of the commerce that they're doing and make decisions based off of that. In that kind of same vein, we've got this idea of chatbots and virtual assistants. So I did a little bit of work on virtual assistants and artificial intelligence when I did some work at IBM a couple of years ago. That was for a Hong Kong insurance agency. And so they were doing a lot of work with travel insurance and being able to take a sort of plain text, just like you would have a conversation with somebody, have a conversation with this chatbot, and they could provide you with unique and tailored outcomes for what kind of insurance they would recommend you. We've got things like self-driving cars and autonomous vehicles, which have also been quite prominently featured in the news, both in positive and negative lights, which is quite a theme, I think, with artificial intelligence at the minute, is that there is lots of arguments to be had on both perspectives as to its impacts in our lives. We've got things like sports analytics, being able to take different metrics from, for example, how someone moves, to even larger metrics such as like on a field, how a team is kind of working together, being able to analyze all of that, and as a coach make decisions based on information that's been given to them. Security and surveillance as well is quite a big one. What else? So we've got medicine, healthcare, and imaging analysis. So this is a really interesting one because it has a direct impact on the life and safety of people in healthcare. So there's been a lot of research done recently in areas such as cancer detection, as well as sort of like genetic analysis and understanding, where you basically are feeding pictures of like x-rays and things into an artificial intelligence, and it's detecting cancer and other medical ailments where the doctors themselves who are on would not be able to detect it, because within the x-ray it was much harder for a human eye to kind of perceive. But these patterns are everywhere, and when a machine is able to kind of repeatedly access these patterns, it can become very efficient at accessing information like that. So it has been used already, I believe, in medicine to help save lives as well. So we've got things like warehousing and logistics, livestock and inventory management. So, and I've also mentioned above agriculture and farming. If you've got like a large collection of sheep or something that are moving around, you're able to sort of understand their habits and patterns about how they exist, and again, can make, as a human, make decisions based on that information that you're given. And then the last one here I've got is music genre recognition and recommendation. So this is something I've worked on a little bit myself in the past, where I was looking at how we can take music, the audio of music, and better understand through different features such as the BPM or the instruments, but also look more holistically at this idea of the emotion defined in music, and using this information to create a tool that recommends to other people music of their taste. So a little bit more technical detail here, but I won't sort of sit on it for too long. But it's important to be aware of the fact that artificial intelligence is not just sort of a global singular thing. There is tons and tons of different models, techniques, and algorithms used, and they're used in vastly different scales by individuals all the way up to corporations and organizations. So they can vary pretty wildly in scale, in objectives, as well as in complexity. And this is valuable because it means that you're able to kind of have more access as an individual to use and engage with some of these tools. And a general sort of point here is that these techniques can be split into kind of two major categories. So it's supervised and unsupervised. It's an important distinction because while a human is involved in creating artificial intelligence on both techniques, a supervised technique is one where there's a human arbiter throughout the process of training the artificial intelligence. So a human will spend their time, for example, with machine vision, or in the case of Stable Diffusion, which I'll talk a bit more about later, will take a picture, so for example, a picture of a dog, and they'll write down next to that picture the word dog, right? So it's pairing this picture and the title of what it is. And that requires a human to go through step by step and associate these things themselves. And then obviously unsupervised is there's no longer a human managing all of these kind of details and deciding what the target is. So just a sort of a general example here, supervised learning is useful for like predicting future trends. So for example, the number of users who will create an account on your website based on previous history, or predicting like sales volumes of products, that kind of thing. Unsupervised is a bit more interesting, to me personally at least, because a human is no longer involved in saying exactly what they want. We can let the artificial intelligence work its magic and kind of bring us to a conclusion that we might not have thought about ourselves. And I think that's where there is a significant benefit to artificial intelligence. So an example here is that if we're looking at the product theme again, we could dump a list of products and just with titles and some pricing information or whatever, and say, group these for me. I don't know how they'd fit together, but chuck them in a group. And it would do that automatically without us having to give it any specifics. So, for example, we could say, if you're going to categorize different products, you could say, oh, this is a health product, this is a sports product or something. You don't have to do any of that with unsupervised. It will just conjoin them in its own way, which is really valuable. And then a couple more examples here are things like neural networks and deep learning, which is just kind of a way of mirroring the human brain patterns and how these different neurons will fire together and synchronously to kind of reach an outcome. Reinforcement learning, which is where the AI will learn something and then will say yes or no as to did it do a good job. Natural language processing, which is one that's been quite relevant for, as we saw earlier, the sentence structure, for example, in Midjourney. Being able to sort of interpret with a machine how a sentence works and understanding that sentence has been really key in the sort of development and growth of these new tools. And we've got one here which is multi-objective learning. So technically this is a layer that goes on top of other models. But the examples with like self-driving cars, right? So you've got two different objectives for this car. The first objective is that it's a car, you want to get from point A to point B and you want to get there quickly, right? The second objective is that safety is a concern and you can't just run people over as you're driving down the road. So you have to be aware of these two objectives. So with multi-objective learning, we can set different weights for how important one of these objectives is over the other. So with self-driving cars, you'd probably weight a little bit more on the A to B just because in general safety is an issue and a variable of everyone on the road, not just the vehicle itself. And then the artificial intelligence will kind of take these weightings and figure out what the best way is for how to get from point A to point B safely. But we don't have to manage any of that. We just say, these are the two objectives that we have. So we'll go into a bit more detail on how Stable Diffusion technically works later. But for the time being, I want to talk a bit about the distribution of power and how relevant the fact that it's community driven and open source software as this kind of idea in IT is to our accessibility of things.
A word that we hear quite a lot in relation to this section is democratization.
Yes, yeah, very important.
You'll be seeing that all over the place.
So, to give you kind of a general overview of open source software, it's a manifesto that's been written up, and it's kind of a community and state of tech users who benefit and support each other in building technology for free, publicly, and with each other. These are not necessarily people who are connected to each other directly or personally. This is just a community of people online who happen to have a shared desire to see technology grow together. It's extremely communal, and even just recently, this is a little bit old now, but about a week ago, this tool called ControlNet released, which was a modifier for Stable Diffusion. Allowed you to do some extra sort of honing in. We can talk about that a little bit later. And a completely separate person to the original developer, within 3 days, had released a full tool to allow you to use it with the pre-existing tools that were available. These guys have no idea who each other are, had never communicated before, and within 3 days had combined their efforts into this really fantastic and useful tool. So AI in the tech space in general is not just dominated by corporates. This is sort of a bit of a misconception, I think, and they do exist. And for example, Midjourney DALI, and a couple of the other platforms out there are sort of corporatized and have paywalls and features to charge users to access the technology. But this is not necessarily a standard. It's just that because it's available and has this ease of use provided to people, they're able to charge for it. But there's other ways to access for free to these kinds of tools because of this entire idea of open source software. So Midjourney, for example, is based on Stable Diffusion, which was developed by Stability AI. That Stable Diffusion is open source. You can access all of the models to use it, and all of the tools surrounding it are developed by the community for free without any cost to the end user. So as long as you've got a bit of technical know-how, you can access all of this stuff without spending any money, and that's really important. So it's strongly driven by a community of passionate open source developers, and they're building together for the greater good of people rather than exclusively for profit. So because of this, there's not as much of a divide between this idea of the elite and the rest as far as the positives and negatives of artificial intelligence go. It's still there and it is worth being aware of, but it's not as much of an issue as people kind of make it out to be because it's significantly community driven.
The media's really beat that up.
Yeah, the media is sensationalist about a lot of this kind of AI space. So just for an example here, there's this tool that I use called Blender, which is a 3D platform. Blender's completely free, open source, so all of the developers, they have a central development team, but it's also available to anyone on the internet who wants to support the tool, can program stuff themselves and submit it to Blender to be pulled into the final tool. So you can see here, they're getting $205,000 a month just from community members. So it's kind of like a Patreon sort of thing where people who are passionate about it are happy to give money to other passionate people to make cool stuff. So you can see here there's 3,000 individuals and then 35 corporate. So if we scroll down a little bit here, you can see, there's a lot of these sort of major brands, Intel and Amazon and AMD, who are all supporting this kind of open tool because it benefits everybody, the corporations and the individuals. So in tech, there is this real idea of benefiting everybody. An interesting thing I'll quickly show you, this is new, what's it called? Moonray, that's it. So just yesterday, DreamWorks just released their entire state-of-the-art render engine called Moonray. So they've used this in a significant majority of their new films. They've just released this to the public, fully open source. Anyone can work on it. Anyone can use it. So yeah, it was used on How to Train Your Dragon, Puss in Boots, The Bad Guys, a couple other of the DreamWorks movies. But they've just released that to the public and said, do what you want with it, it's fully free. And because they know that people will, as a community, help to make it better.
You've already downloaded it.
Well, I have, but it's not been implemented properly for Blender yet, so I'm waiting for one of those lovely community members to develop an integration for it. And I'll briefly show you too. So I'm not sure if you guys have seen GitHub yet, but this will be a recurring platform that you'll access the more you kind of look into artificial intelligence. But you can see here all of these folders and different files and things. This is the source code of Blender, just completely available online. You can just go in and download it and edit it and do whatever you want with it. And if you've created some really cool stuff, then the guys who are managing the GitHub will pull that in and send it out for everybody to use. So it's a really sort of supportive space where everyone's helping each other, making technology, teaching processes, and when everyone's working together, you kind of get, everything just gets better, right? So it's super valuable. So following that up, I want to talk a little bit more about the specifics of Stable Diffusion. So Stable Diffusion as a model was trained on the Lion dataset. I'll just bring that up really quickly as well. So this dataset is 6 billion clip-filtered image text pairs. So to describe that a little bit more clearly, clip-filtered image text pairs is essentially, like I said earlier, you've got a picture of a dog and it has the text word dog associated with it, or the color black has the word black associated with it. So it's just pairing these kind of concepts with an image that exists. So that 6 billion pairs is 14 times larger than what their previous set was. And this totals 240 terabytes of data. So I'll just quickly show. So these guys are also non-profit and open source, a recurring theme, meaning that anyone, as long as they've got the hardware, and that's something where you can also accommodate with like cloud computing, for example, is able to take this data set and train their own models on anything using the data available. So yeah, that's 240 terabytes of data, which is a pretty significant amount of space. But what's interesting is that after being trained, the final models of Stable Diffusion are only 5 gigabytes each, massively decreasing the size used. And this is because they're not actually storing any imagery themselves, but they're storing this kind of awareness of a concept, right? So they're not saving this picture, this JPEG of the dog, but they're storing an understanding of what a dog is, right? And just for a bit of sense of scale, the internet at the moment contains roughly 5,000 petabytes of data, which is about 5 billion gigabytes, right? So there's a lot of data on the internet. And as time goes on, the size of these data sets that we're able to use will only grow and give us more availability to things. Data is a huge fundamental to how machine learning and artificial intelligence works. Without data, you have nothing. And the more data you can give artificial intelligence, the better and more accurate it will be in general. So a bit of tech jargon here, but I'll kind of explain it a bit nicer in a minute. So Stable Diffusion models are trained with the objective of removing successive applications of Gaussian noise on training images. So a quote from the Wikipedia page here is that the VAE encoder compresses the image, so a JPEG picture, from pixel space, right? So you've got this kind of XY grid of pixels that looks like a picture, to a smaller dimensional latent space, which captures a more fundamental semantic meaning of the image. In essence, Stable Diffusion works by removing noise from pictures and comparing that noise to certain keywords. So if you've ever used denoise in Photoshop, that's essentially like a real basic level of how it's kind of processing this imagery. So here's a really complicated picture. And you can see there's quite a lot going on in the back end of the Stable Diffusion model here. To make it a little bit easier, I've shown it like this. So you can see we're taking this input image, so this JPEG of a dog up the top. It goes through a thing called the diffusion process, hence the name, where it kind of compresses the image into latent space. I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it, but essentially you've got, as an image, the XY coordinates of the pixels on your 2D sheet. Latent space kind of mushes that into like this more 3D awareness of ideas. You don't really need to know the sort of the super technical details of it, but it understands the meaning of it in this area. Then you can see here we've got this conditioning section, and so that's where we're using things like text or images to affect what we want as a result. So here, if our example could be the prompt, a photograph of a dog, that's what we type in, and then it goes through this denoising process. So you can see here on step 1, we start with this completely random block of noise, and it runs through steps of denoising it. So here on step 2, you can see that it's made it a little bit cleaner than what it was in the first step. And how it calculates what is noise is impacted by this conditioning that we used at the beginning. So that goes through its whole denoising process through several steps, and usually the more steps you have, the better a final result you'll get. And we get this output image, another JPEG of a dog, for example. What is worth noting here is that the image of the dog is completely different to whatever the input image of the dog was, right? So as far as how it's trained, it's got millions of pictures of dogs that it's taken in and knows that they're dogs. Whatever we generate as a photo of a dog will be this kind of idea of all of these millions of different dogs. It's not any of those images mixed together as far as like copy pasting sections of it. It's this entire overarching idea of what a dog is. In imagery anyway. So if we start with a picture of a dog, you can see here I've got 3 different images just using the prompt, a photograph of a dog. And I've got each of the different steps. So I think we've got 1 step, 2 steps, 5, 10, 15, and 30. So you can kind of see how it starts to get more clear what the actual image is as we process and with more and more denoising steps. You can also note, for example, here, it's quite obvious that the dog has down-facing ears. As it denoises more, it kind of changes what it wants to do and gives him pointed ears. And then as we go further, it switches again and has 1 pointed ear and 1 down-facing ear. So it's a fair bit of play to kind of go through and find where the fine line is as to what looks the best.
So does that mean that the noise image at the beginning isn't technically what the output is going to be because it adjusts every step?
Yeah, exactly. So if I go back here, so each time we go to generate an image, we get 1 random block of noise at the start, which is affected by a thing called a seed. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But essentially, a seed just allows you to change or define how the random noise will look. So you can replicate images. If you get the same seed each time, you'll get the same block of random noise. But every time you generate, you'll get a new block of random noise with a new seed. That random noise is what you start with, and how it denoises will be impacted by the conditioning. So if we have the same seed, which means we have the same random block of noise, and the same parameters and conditioning, so in this case the photograph of a dog, every time you generate it, you should, in theory, get the same result back, because it will always be using the same inputs to make the decisions.
So for instance, if you got a dog that was, whatever, green, and you wanted it to be black.
I've got that on the next slide, in fact. So, just briefly, we show this image of a dog, right? Just imagine that these were raw photos. You can actually use AI trained photos as well, which is an interesting sort of multi-layered technique. You take pre-existing JPEG photos or whatever format, and you can feed them into the AI. And we attach the keyword, for example, dog, here to them. So the AI has shown these different pictures of the dog and associated with the keyword. And in training, what it does is it actually goes backwards, right? So it takes this flat picture of a dog and it will add more noise over the top of them. So each step, it will add more and more and more and more and more noise until it is just a random block of noise essentially at the end. So when we go to generate it, it reverses those steps and then pushes through to actually create the final image, because it knows how it went from a dog to noise. It can now go, how do I go from noise to a dog? So it plays it backwards and kind of understands what that keyword looks like because of it.
And obviously then a random seed will then provide you with a different output even...
Yeah, so you can have, as long as every parameter is the same, you'll get the same result. But if you have every parameter the same but change the seed, you get a different noise block, which means the output image will be different every time. So
Green dog, Ross.
we've trained the artificial intelligence on this concept of a dog. So what if we want to do something else with it? So let's train the artificial intelligence with this concept of the keyword black. So we do the same steps. We take all of these different pictures of whatever the concept black looks like, and we push through taking that picture and adding noise and layers over the top of it. So later, if we want, we can ask the AI to generate a photograph of a black dog. And as you can see here, we now have a dog with black fur. I also threw in a blue dog and a green dog, and then here in the bottom is, I think my prompt was a cyberpunk dog with spray painted fur. It quite likes the pink and blue aesthetic for those ones. I didn't actually set any of the colors for that. I just said cyberpunk, and that's what I decided that meant. The other thing that's important here is this idea of weighting. So when we've got this kind of prompt sentence structure that's got all of these different keywords in it, so dog, black, or in this case, photograph even, we can change how much those words will impact the final result. So that's using weights, which we can vary ourselves through a couple of different ways. But if we say black dog and reduce the weight of dog, we will always get, well, again, in theory, we will always get a black animal, but it may not necessarily be as much of a clear dog because we've reduced the weight. The same thing as if we say black dog, but we reduce the weight on black significantly, we're always going to get a dog, but black may or may not come into what the final image is as much. Weights are relative to each other, so if you decrease the weight, you're not going to remove the keyword entirely. So if you've got black dog and you reduce the weight of it a little bit, in general, you're still going to get a black dog as the end result, but it's how much of the image is black as opposed to being a dog kind of thing. So yeah, they're relative to each other in the sentence. Put in what you want to be there, and what you don't, you can always use negative prompts, which we might talk about a little bit later as well. So if you've only got a few keywords, then decreasing the weight would probably have limited impact because there's only a few ideas that you're going to be asking it to generate anyway. It's more helpful when you've got a really filled out prompts that you want to kind of refine a little bit more to certain ideas in it. So I want to talk a little bit about this impact of AI on artists. And I think have you talked a bit about this already, as mentioned?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
so I'm kind of taking a slightly less sort of specific view on it, but we've got this kind of idea of like exposure and art adjacent business. So there's a guy whose name's come up quite a lot post AI, Greg Rutkowski. In the public sphere, nobody really knew who he was or knew of his name until his name was a mainstay in AI prompting. So for reference, Greg is a freelance artist, does concept art. He's done work for Wizards of the Coast on Magic the Gathering. He's worked with Blizzard and Disney, for example. He was pretty well known internally to the industry, but in the overall public sphere, he wasn't that well known. And as you can see from this little Instagram screenshot, and there's a few more I found, going to his pages recently, a lot of people were coming across Greg because of his name being used in artificial intelligence. You can see here they've got the term some bozo, so they've got quite a predefined conception of the positivity, or lack thereof, in artificial intelligence. But people are undoubtedly finding Greg because of his name in artificial intelligence. So I'll just quickly show you his Instagram here. So he's quite involved actually in artificial intelligence and regulation for it. He's been sort of fairly vocal about being against AI in certain areas. But yeah, you can see like some of his work here. It's really high quality stuff, and sort of is quite oil painty, and yeah, like he puts a lot of effort in and makes some really cool final results. And because of that, it is also quite a useful tool when trying to generate images, which is, yeah, it's divided people a little bit. So I just kind of wanted to mention that because even a small percentage of these people that are this absolutely enormous new user base using artificial intelligence for things like Midjourney and whatever, there's so many people that are understanding and learning about these creators and appreciating his work, and probably, like as you can see, are actively viewing his social media and things because of artificial intelligence, that you can't deny that there is an opportunity there for artists to kind of lean into an additional sort of income stream. It's not necessarily negative or positive inherently, but yeah, because of this broader awareness, there is a window for opportunity. It's a bit of a double-edged sword because again, there's this kind of topic on the idea of stealing art and where that leads. But you can't deny that there is value in, for small existing artists, having this kind of wider public accessibility. The main issue is that a lot of artists sort of care about making their art and not necessarily about business. And so it's a matter of really changing your mindset and kind of looking at how you could capitalize on the potential there. But yeah, the benefit's debatable, but there's no denying the increase in viewership to some of these people. So on that notion of stealing and what that means, there's this idea of sort of copyright and transformative versus derivative. And again, it's quite a heated topic and it's not come to any formal conclusion anywhere at the minute. So I've sort of personally leaned towards the person who requested a generation holding the IP for an image, whether it's that the person holds the IP of the parameters used, because again, the parameters impact what final image is generated, including the seed. So it results in the same final imagery. It's currently pretty fluctuating. In Australia, the IP is not recognised as owned by the generator or the AI. So at the minute, you can't really consider any generations you make your IP. With that said, I don't actually see the initial generation of imagery as the final outcome for the most part anyway. With a lot of the work that I've done with it, I'm always either doing further editing on whatever I generate, or have put in my own input, as for example, an image that I've created in Blender myself, where I've built up the whole scene, done modeling and everything, and then used that as the source for a generation. In those sort of instances, I believe IP is held by you because it was your additional transformative modifications to the work being done. And finally, I just wanted to kind of bring up the idea of indirect and direct competition. It's the idea of, if you've got a pizza restaurant, right? You've got Indian and Asian restaurants that are nearby. But as a pizza restaurant, you're not just dealing with other restaurants, right? Customers could also go to the grocery store nearby instead and make food at home. Essentially what I'm trying to say is that as an artist, you're not just competing with other artists, and you're not just competing with artificial intelligence, you're competing for attention from all different sources. And it kind of, yeah, it's just worth thinking about the fact that it's not just about art as a sort of siloed concept here.
It's not AI versus human.
Exactly. This is an interesting tweet I found. So there's, the tweet follows that an artist had said, "Hard pills to swallow. Fan art is theft, and using it to gain followers and commissions is the lazy way, especially when you're talented enough to create your own original works and characters." So Piccolo here stated that, nah, drawing Teen Titans fan art got me hired by DC to draw a New York Times best-selling series for them. Just draw what you genuinely like. What's worth noting here is, as you can see in the bottom, the original post saying that fan art is theft got 1,000 likes and a huge amount of retweets, right? The person who is a comic artist who got his work because of drawing fan art got 170,000 likes, right? So there's a clear kind of public perception that fan art's totally okay, and yeah, the work is being done because you enjoy doing it, right? I just find this interesting because of the fact that in public perception of artificial intelligence, where it's kind of the same thing, right? Like if you're using pre-existing IP to generate work, it's got a much harsher perspective in public than this idea of fan art. Despite the fact that both are based on someone else's IP as kind of a foundational point. So, as far as communication design and how we can kind of implement AI in the way that we work. So when using artificial intelligence, at the end of the day, a creative like yourselves is the one directing the work, right? We still have to prompt it. We still have to kind of come up with ideas about what we want the final result to be. And it's important to think about the objective of the design. So if we're doing, for example, commercial design work, the client and creative relationship is required, despite the fact that there's tech involved, to be able to reach a tangible and effective outcome that succeeds at what the client's looking for. So, for example, here we're talking about marketing. If you don't know what your audience wants, right, then you're not going to get anything useful out of the generations that you've made. So you can generate stuff all you want from Midjourney or whatever and slap it up on social media trying to sell a product. It's not going to sell anything if it's not tailored to the audience that you're trying to tailor it to. Now, it's important to note that, as I mentioned earlier, artificial intelligence is everywhere, and we can use things like data analytics AI to define our target audiences automatically. And there's a lot of this kind of, we can use tech to build on other tech and give us this collated idea of things. But ultimately, it's going to fall on a person to make a decision about something. And even from like the person who's running the business, they'll have an idea as the business owner and as a person wanting to put things out into the world of what they want to put out into the world, right? They're going to pick and choose, even if it's from generated imagery, what they want to be represented by online. So there is definitely going to be negative impacts to particular artists in certain spaces. So, you know, there's those that are at the top of the game and those that are not, and the subpar will get fucked. It's pretty unfortunate, but it's happened in years past with things like printing. You know, you've gone from manual printing or even writing to having printing presses and things. There's always this kind of growing technology that will displace some, and it's kind of a matter of just keeping on top of it and being aware of what you add value-wise to the work that you're doing. So, as Dad said, think different, be different, and do different. So future creatives will be required to expand their skill set further into kind of the communications and audience understanding spaces. You can no longer kind of be set apart by just doing work that people tell you to do, right? If you don't provide this extra value and just create what people ask you to create, there's essentially no difference between the work that you're doing and the infinitely cheaper AI alternative. They won't choose you if that's the case. This idea of sort of design thinking, right? So we've got people like mathematicians who I fully believe are design thinkers. They have to be creative in understanding problems and how they kind of go about manipulating the problem to reach their theorems and things. Calculators helped to make this easier, but they didn't solve the creative problem, right? We still have to kind of think about things ourselves to make the final conclusion. We just get this intermediary step that saves us time and effort on the way there. Another thing, sort of more on the tech side, is there's this platform called Stack Overflow. The entire tech industry uses this platform, and it just helps make things easier, right? So Stack Overflow, just for an example, is a community forum where people ask questions about software, and other people will post code and answers about how to solve certain problems. It's super helpful to just go there, see, I don't know what I'm doing with this piece of code. How can I solve it? Someone is online will have almost certainly posted how to fix a certain issue, right? So we go there and we access pre-existing code and implement it back into our sort of code base. With that said, while it is really handy, as a programmer, you still have to architect the software, right? You have to understand what you want to achieve with the software and how you're going to go about achieving that, right? It's saving us the difficulty of this menial midpoint work where certain things have to work in certain ways. We slap that in and understand the greater architecture to reach this kind of desired result. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. We just buy a wheel and put it on our car, right? The car being software architecture in this case. So AI helps to sort of democratize creative mediums and allows us sort of more true creative freedom with lower barriers to entry. So there's a lot of issues in the past where this sort of the bedroom artist just didn't have access to all of this, the tooling required to be able to make what they had envisioned. And that's falling apart nowadays. Like, we're able to access and visualize and bring to life whatever we imagine with pretty much no barriers there anymore. So Nico Ferenga, who is the founder of Corridor Digital, I believe you've seen some work from, said that part of our humanity is to try to visualize things that don't exist, right? As humans, we all visualize things, we all want to bring things to reality. And technology and artificial intelligence is just a really great stepping stone to bring what we're imagining to life. And it's worth noting too that in tech, the entire paradigm's perpetually and rapidly shifting and changing. So there's always things that are replacing other stuff. It's just kind of a way of life, and you don't sit there and say, here's some work that I did 5 years ago. It's outdated, but I'm not going to learn anything new, right? Like, there's always stuff changing. You just say, cool, it's extra stuff to work with and play with, and you just push forwards through it. So I'm going to go through some sort of like case studies here and talk a bit about how AI tools have been implemented. So I'll show a video in a little bit of Corridor Digital. They've done a couple interesting like cinematics and animations using artificial intelligence as a supportive tool. And it's worth pointing out how much the story is brought to reality using the tool. We've got in even large industry, like Whetter Digital, have done work on Avatar 2, for example. And they have recently done a lot of work with machine learning for their filming process. So they added to their cameras, they've got two tiny little sub cameras on the side of the main one that's filming. What those cameras are processing is depth, right? So you've got two cameras kind of like eyes, right? And you can see how far away things are and what's in front of other things. They use machine learning to generate this depth map and understand what's in front and what's behind. And with that depth map, they're able to, in camera, place 3D CG characters and things into the scene. And so the director's standing here looking at whatever the cameraman's filming, and he's able to see this essentially finished result of a scene with CG characters interacting with the real actors in real time. That's super valuable because it means that as a director, you don't have to sit and film like you're on green screen and wait for these kind of inhibiting steps. You can just film what you think looks good, and it's a more sort of human approach to working, I think. And similarly, they've got, they were using AI to calculate muscle and how muscle moves in facial structure for performance capture. So when they were filming the Na'vi characters, they basically just filmed their faces, and it's all calculated how that will manipulate the 3D characters for them. So again, it takes out this step of work, and they're able to just get to a cleaner and clearer final result more efficiently and work in a way that's more intuitive as a human. It's more like you're just filming, people in a typical space. There's another one of video Mortal Kombat, which I'll show you as well, and that's kind of going through a typical video workflow and some facial tracking stuff. So then we've got some more sort of generalized artwork, right? So there's this guy called Stealthy, and he does like time traveler artwork, so that's pretty interesting. It's been used for photo restoration, so taking really old photos and passing them through an AI, and it will clean it up. It'll, if you want, you can add color. All of these steps that previously would require multiple different tools to achieve, we can just run it through, and it gives us this real nice final result. Things like background generation, so we can outpaint a picture. So if you've got like a really shoddy photo from a client, for example, that you need to fill out to a space on a promotional poster, you can just outpaint the background and throw a little bit of a blur on top of it, right? And you've got this entire thing sorted without having to manually clone tool or stamp tool the background out. You just throw it in, and it gives you the dimensions that you need to look nice. We've got things like brand identity and logo creation people have been working on. It's quite an interesting one because there is still a fair bit of sort of randomness and chaos in what you can generate, and so it's not necessarily going to be particularly refined, but it's really good for concepting all of the time. Things like advertising and social media has had quite some relevance in, upscaling and enhancing low resolution or pixel art. So I've seen a lot of people that have been doing like video game remasters of like Fallout 1 and that kind of thing, where they're up-resing all of these really tiny pixel characters and kind of bringing them more to a modern visualization. And then I've even seen people doing some like rapid prototyping and character model sheets. So if they've got this kind of idea for a character that they want to design, we can use tools like ControlNet to put poses like you would have on a typical character sheet and generate this character from different perspectives. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff we can do there. And it's worth noting that you don't have to use pre-existing models like Midjourney and stuff. There are ways that you can train things yourself and make your own models and utilize your own work and inspiration as the foundation for these things. You don't have to rely on stuff that other people have done, because as we'll talk about, there's some issues with like genericism and this kind of devaluing of AI when everyone's doing the same thing. So just some case studies here. So we've got this guy Stealthy, right? So you can see, he's doing a lot of historical moments that he's putting his stealthy character. It's the same guy you can see in each of these pictures. And he's doing some meme work, for example, as well. So Stealthy does his work by combining multiple techniques with artificial intelligence and Photoshop. And so he uses 3 models to generate his work as well. So Stable Diffusion 1.5 he's using for the general sort of scene work, setting up the environment and what the kind of composition of things will be. He's got a second model that's trained specifically on the Stealthy face. And so that's making it easier to replicate this particular character every time. And that's really important because otherwise you would lose this kind of maintained character identity between the images. And then he sometimes uses a model for landscapes. So in the background of like this Christmas one up the top, or I believe he used it in, which one? I believe he used it in this as well, to kind of create this really interesting Eldorado gate background. So he sometimes uses a third model just to kind of get a nicer or more interesting background design. And then after all of that, he goes through and cleans up everything manually with Photoshop. He does in-painting on it, so if he doesn't like how a guy's arm is sitting, for example, he will in-paint that, you know, multiple times to kind of reach his desired look. So we'll just quickly go through here.
And this is kind of where your design knowledge steps in, all right? So if you're going to be sort of doing things where you are, you know, manipulating imagery to try and tell a story through that image, then sure, you can use AI as a foundation for it, but you're going to need to use your design skills and your understanding of composition and structure and tonality and so on to actually make the images look right. Otherwise, they're going to look janky.
Exactly. Composition is a big part, and that's something that Stealthy shows at the start here. So you can see this is a
6 hours and 50, yeah.
So he starts by actually drawing out a sketch defining the composition of the piece that he wants. And then from that sketch, he starts to generate different aspects and elements of the scene. And you can see that the resolution's a bit janked because he's just taking sections of it and manipulating them separately. Here he doesn't like how the guy's beard looks, so he changes that a bit, and he changes up the roping and you know, the boat in the background, changes that a bit as well. So it started from a composition that he had sketched out himself and visualized in his mind, right? He has this idea of what he wants to achieve, and then he uses the artificial intelligence tools in a way that allows him to rapidly, but still 7 hours or 7 at a time, reach this kind of desired outcome where it's sort of, you know, it's essentially photography of this complete fantasy scene that he visualized before starting any of it. Like he created the entire concept from the get-go and just used AI as this intermediary tool to reach what he was looking for.
I have a question. Do you know if he inputs the sketch into the AI?
So it's an interesting point. Stealthy, I believe on that one, did not input the sketch. I believe he drew the sketch for his own visualization and kind of referred
So
back to it.
Yeah.
But it's something I'll show probably a bit later. There's a lot of really interesting tech now with Stable Diffusion that lets you input things like sketches and generate full imagery. Yeah, for sure. So depending on how you want to go about it, you can totally draw a sketch and use that as a foundational point in the actual Stable Diffusion process if you want to. So in a little bit, it's not using a sketch, but I did some work using my pre-existing animation and then processing based on that, so I'll show that in a minute.
Right, sorry to interrupt. We might just do this one, and then guys, I think we'll just have a 15-minute break. Just let Brand talk through this one.
Yep.
There is some really cool other stuff coming and some good visual stuff, and it really links into hopefully what you take away from this first kind of hour, which is to give you that sort of back-end stuff so that you know that what this is doing is actually helping you in a process. It's not just the end result. And then get you to follow through with those other case studies of yours.
Yeah, for sure. So this was just sort of an example that I saw when I was scrolling through Instagram one day. So BMW for Valentine's Day had generated this AI image of one of their cars as a chocolate. So they didn't set out and manufacture these chocolates because they would be quite expensive to do so. So instead they just generated an image of it and slapped it in. Now it's a little bit janky on some of it, like you can see on the chocolates in the box, you know, the perspective's a little bit weird, and the way that the cars, for example, are all just duplications, right? So they could do a bit more work as far as like in Photoshop or something, manipulating them to just be a bit more variable and look a bit nicer. But in general, they kind of took this marketing strategy of using artificial intelligence to theme their product for the event, in this case, Valentine's Day. And for BMW, this is pretty in line with their entire business strategy, which is very AI oriented. And a lot of the stuff that they're pushing recently with their car lines is this idea of AI enhanced vehicles. So they've got, for example, a new thing in some of their vehicles of an AI that learns individual driver preferences. So things like seat position, different temperature settings inside the car, anything that the car can change and manipulate, this AI will learn to identify what the driver enjoys and make changes based on that. They also use AI for all of their engineering and sales processes as well. And as I mentioned earlier about in sales using AI to kind of predict and analyze what product lines are doing particularly well. They use some of that sort of predictive analytics and big data to kind of power their design philosophy. But yeah, so we'll take a break there, I think.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So we'll have 15 minutes, guys.
Flow of how some people have been using things like Stable Diffusion in their creative work. And then just a little bit more sort of discussion on the idea of genericism in AI. And that's sort of about it for the presentation. So, where are we? So, this was one of the first play arounds I had with Stable Diffusion actually. So I sort of started around October, maybe a little bit earlier in 2022. I played around with this in November. So this was just sort of a quick piece I made in Blender, like this cube in sort of a snowy scene. What's kind of interesting about what I was working with there is that every single texture in this scene that you see is generated using Stable Diffusion. So this kind of like cracked block look on the cube, that was generated by just asking it to generate some like so I think alien cracks, something along those lines was prompting that I used. And then I did some texturing work and some shader work to kind of make it glow and animate. The backgrounds there is actually, if you've worked in 3D before, just a plane, literally 2D flat plane, essentially just like a billboard in the background of this like snowy town that I generated. And just slapped in the background and put some depth of field on the camera so it blows it out a little bit. Yeah, and then I did a bit more sort of shader work so that the color was emissive and so that you get this kind of nice kind of glowing movement to some of the lighting in it. So there's a lot that you can kind of do by starting with this kind of concept. Like I literally just put a plane on the floor, plane in the background for what I wanted the background to be, slapped a cube in it. And then kind of filled in all the details with Stable Diffusion to work that. So the next one, this one I did a little bit more recently for this Endless Engines competition that a guy called Clint is running. So it's kind of a bit of an architectural sort of nightmare, as the title goes. You can see here each of the things in the project was modeled by me, textured by me as well. So all of this sort of pre-existing concept I built entirely myself. And I did a bit of iteration on how I wanted the visuals to look each step of the way. So as part of the process, I had done like an initial block out of here's like a rectangle of roughly where the character will be, some sort of the background regions. And so I ran that first pass through Stable Diffusion with some prompts on like H.R. Geiger, architectural, horror, some other kind of horror-inspired terms, and got back some interesting results, which I then used to continue to manually tailor the final sort of imagery. And then a little bit later up here, where are we? Okay, so I've done some compositing in DaVinci Resolve to kind of push this like burn-over effect that switches it from the initial 3D work into this kind of Stable Diffusion frame by frame. And so I've got quite a lot of different frames in here, as you can see. I just did a batch process on it. So I took the frames that I'd individually rendered out from Blender, used the same prompt and parameters in Stable Diffusion, and just went through frame by frame, generating a new image for each of them. So it maintains the sense of motion and the position of the character and background environment throughout each of the generations using a tool called ControlNet, which helps to kind of modify and specify how we want the Stable Diffusion to process the image. So I'll show a bit more of that in a little bit. But yeah, you can see there's quite a decent bit of variety in them, but the overall...
So each of those variations were just a prompt?
So
each frame of these ones here
Yes.
was a different version of...
Yeah, so I had one prompt that I'd written out that I did some singular tests on and liked how the results looked. And then I just ran that prompt repeatedly on each of the frames in the animation sequence. So it was the same prompt, just the animation input frame differed a little bit. And because the animation input frame differed a little bit, how it generated a final result changed on each of the frames.
And this is almost like stop motion on that sort of level.
Yeah.
Is it the same seed as well?
I was doing random seeds on these ones because I kind of liked how it changed the shape and the form of the monster a little bit between them. What's important to note is because I was using ControlNet, which allows us control over like depth of the image, and this tool called Canny, which kind of does like an outlining of the input image. You can see that the form and like where the legs and the background positioning and everything is all maintained throughout the Stable Diffusion frames. So there's a consistency between each of the frames outputted, and it's just kind of how that consistency changes a little bit that gives it this kind of interesting variation. And so this one was a Mortal Kombat animation. So this was done using Stable Diffusion for a style transfer, and then using Absinthe, which is another AI-powered tool for frame-to-frame consistency. So I'll show you the video for this one. See, like, there's a lot of traditional manual work being done for getting the foundation of it, and then it's style transferring using the manual work to kind of save some time and effort. So they're using another tool, Absinthe, here to put in keyframes, sort of like typical animation, and then it interpolates those keyframes for all of the mid-frames. So that's a good representation of how you can utilize tools such as Stable Diffusion and Absinthe as part of a creative workflow without it being the entire process, right? So there's a lot of initial input that the creative has and is building this idea around, and then just using the AI tools to kind of amplify their ability to achieve that. Right. So Corridor Digital, who I've been told you've seen a little bit about, have done a similar kind of process where they used style models, a custom model trained on character faces so they can maintain consistency on their characters in the process. And for specifically the rock, paper, scissors anime piece they did, the background was also a 3D scene built in Unreal Engine that they then compressed into 2D background imagery using their Stable Diffusion style tool. So this first one was like a Spider-Man No Way Home kind of piece that they did. This was one of their original works.
It's the nexus of the multiverse, kid. Now shut up, because I don't remember which post to put in this little cup. Oh yeah, this is the one.
you from another dimension?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll make it quick. All right, let's do this one last time. My name's Peter Parker. I was bitten by a radioactive spider, and for 6 years I've been the one and only Spider-Man. Well, I was dead for 5 of those years, but that's another story. I saved a bunch of people, fell in love, saved the city, and then the world. I even joined a team. You might have heard of them. Nah, not them. There was Captain America. Also, we had Hulk, Thor, Black Widow, Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Ant-Man, Falcon, the Winter Soldier, Vision, and oh, that guy with the bow and arrow. And I'll never forget my mentor, Mr. Stark. What else? Oh, there was this big purple guy. His chin kind of looked like. Huh? Who are these guys?
Oh, here we go. Not again. Who are you guys anyway?
I gotta say, you look just like me.
Say my name and I'm magically appeared.
Who's next?
This still part of the experiment.
You close your spider.
Beware my tasty hostess snacks.
So there's a lot in this, but and I recommend you go back and sort of in your own time watch through it in slow motion at like 0.25 speed, just so you can kind of try and pick up on anything. But briefly, this is a lot of the work that they've done. So Peter Parker, whoops, Peter Parker here. Sorry, my being clunky. So, Peter Parker here, you might have noticed watching through that his eyes were sometimes a little bit flickery, and so that was one of the main issues with consistency in frames. This is a little bit of an older video from Corridor Digital, but he's entirely filmed on green screen and then processed through Stable Diffusion to do this kind of style transfer and make him look more like the movie, the animated film. So, you know, they're taking here, this is just footage from the movie that they've taken and then compositing it in DaVinci, and I think they use Nuke as well. And so they're kind of working through, here they do some flickering between the characters. You know, there's a lot of this stuff's composited. Here, I believe in Nuke, they're doing this processing to give it that kind of comic look with the stippling and some of the outlining. So that's extra post-processing that they're doing themselves, sort of manual work. So, you know, there's a lot of different techniques here that they're sort of integrating. You know, like these comic book pieces that they're dropping, they've just taken like a good photo of the actor from their film, ran it through Stable Diffusion and picked one that fit that kind of aesthetic the way that they wanted it to be. And again here, like they're doing compositing work with some pre-existing footage, applying that in their visual editing and having Stable Diffusion running for some of the characters to make them tie in a bit better. And then like here at the very end, they've got, this is just a Blender scene where they've just thrown in a bunch of T-posing Spider-Men to kind of pad out and create this final shot. So it's worth sort of going through again in your own time, just looking through and seeing which sections they've kind of worked on what. And then I'll let this one just play through in its entirety, but this is a bit more of a recent one that they've done, which has also had a bit of controversy, but I think is sort of a fantastic demonstration of the tool. in storytelling and being able to really quickly produce pretty high quality material with not too much sort of limitations on it. So I'll just let this one play through and then talk a little bit about it after. And they've got a breakdown video that I'll show some sections in as well.
Father always said that you were the more artistic one.
Have you forgotten you're my twin brother? The Creator dealt us the same hand of cards. I just played mine better. You missed the funeral.
Only come for the part that matters.
I will not share the crown.
So we'll never wear it!
I've dedicated my life to government, and the kingdom is on the precipice of starvation. The throne must be mine, or millions will die.
Have you forgotten you're my twin brother? We were born at the same time. My claim to the throne is just as valid as yours.
Well, I'm sorry you traveled all this way for nothing, brother. I control the city garrison. I'll have you exiled.
Let us not forget the power to settle this lays in the palm of our hands. Do you remember what Father taught us about holy combat?
You dare suggest?
Father, say, brother!
Here, in this holy house, in front of our Father and the Creator themselves.
For the crown, the throne, and the lives of millions under his rule, I challenge you,
Fool! You know not what you do!
I challenge you to rock, paper, cross, blades!
Have you gone insane, brother? You project such confidence, and yet your eye quivers. I know you too well, but if I can read you so clearly, then how can I win? If I can read the slightest detail on your face, can read mine. We're brothers. We think we're different, but on the seabed of instinct where, like weak sunlight, rays of thought are unable to pierce, we are the same. You will predict my every move.
My poor brother, I can sense your fear. We have spent every day of our lives together. You are an open book to me. It will be trivial to defeat you thanks to my ancient technique.
I can already feel them in my mind. The moment I pick my move, you'll know. For the good of the kingdom, I must win. But how? One. The answer is obvious when I think about it, but it terrifies me. Two. If he's in my mind, I must have no mind. I must eliminate all thought. Three. Yes, if I never make a decision, he will never be able to predict me. It's beautifully perfect. Father, you would be proud.
Shoot! Poetic. It appears we even share similarities in holy combat. No matter, the strategy holds. Onward as planned.
1, 2, 3, shoot!
Again? Does he know my strategy?
2 stones in a row. What are the chances?
Did he steal my notes? Did he follow me into the archives? No. Stay the course.
Don't change a thing. The moment you let a thought enter your head, you lose.
Again! 1, 2, 3, shoot! My heart screams at me to change course, to throw paper and win, but I must not listen!
Is my plan too obvious? To never change the shape of my hand, not a conscious thought in my mind? If I am to be the master of this kingdom, I must start by ruling my mind.
It restrains my will to its very limit! 4 rocks in a row? Spare us your churlish outbursts.
Father would be proud. Neither prince wavering in their resolve.
He still watches us, silent. It can't be. Yes, it was me. He challenged me to rock, paper, crossblades. And for the wager, all lies!
Crossed blades?
my power, and neither do you, brother.
Father, it's so obvious I feel like a dollar for not seeing it earlier. We're twins, bound to the same ropes of the roadway of the cosmos. He will only throw stone. It's how he defeated you, and it's how he plans to defeat me. And now that I know his secret, ending this will be trivial. Thank you for helping me see, Father.
For the entire kingdom and the crown.
Let's finish this. One, two, three. Shout!
My sons, behold the realm which you will inherit and the noble citizens that support it. Each and every one a subscriber to CorridorDigital.com, contributing to the satisfaction and enlightenment of citizens in realms far beyond our borders. But to reach our goal of total enlightenment, we must expand our domain. So we must spread the message. Subscribe to CorridorDigital.com. Now, say it with me, boys.
So it's a pretty impressive video for a team of, I think about 5 people were working on that one for about a month from memory. To get this kind of essentially finished piece of about 9 minutes of content is really impressive in the time frame that they had to work with it. So I'll sort of skim through this breakdown video a little bit. And again, this is one that I recommend heavily that you watch fully in your own time to kind of get a better understanding of how they worked on this. But
wouldn't it be cool if you could film yourself and easily turn into anything you want, like a cartoon character? What if this could just be a means of capturing performance and making visualize whatever your imagination wants afterwards? This kind of no limits creativity is only accessible to films or animations with multi-million-dollar budgets, but it's part of our humanity to try to visualize things that don't exist. Like, let's talk about traditional 2D animation, cartoons. The most creatively liberated medium is also the least democratized. It takes incredibly skilled people drawing every single frame of your movie to make it happen. But I think we came up with a new way to animate, a way to turn reality into a cartoon. It's one more step towards true creative freedom, where we can easily create anything we want. So how do we do this? How do we turn a video into a cartoon? Well, we've been making a series of videos where we experiment with AI image processing. This is similar to AI image generation, but in our case, we are transforming images rather than generating them from scratch. So one of the newest pieces of technology is a machine learning process known as diffusion. At its core, the diffusion process lets a computer generate an image from noise, much like how we imagine an image from an ink blot or looking at clouds. So if we take a picture we already have and put a little bit of noise on top, we can have the computer clear up that noise while drawing in new details that weren't there before. It's a lot like looking at a picture and squinting your eyes and trying to imagine you're looking at something else. And if you squint a lot, well, what you're looking at becomes really fuzzy. And you can imagine that you're looking at something different. So current technology can do this amazingly with one image. So why haven't we seen it applied to video? Should we be seeing mind-blowing visuals all over the internet? Fortunately, the moment people tried applying this to video, everything fell apart. Because the first step in the process requires us to noise up our image every single frame ends up looking different, and the video gets super flickery. The very nature of this tech seems to make it impossible to ever work with video. And well, I nearly gave up on using it. But Dean, here at the studio, kept experimenting, and he showed them a little bit of VFX problem solving. This might be something that we could actually overcome. It was at the time that Dean and Brannoc Whetter made that Spider-Verse short, and I set off on a personal quest to use this tech to enable me to create my very own anime. So it was time to Sherlock Holmes our way through this and engineer a solution to this flickering problem. And the first clue.
And something I'll just say there is this idea of Sherlock Holmesing through stuff is really important in the space of AI, and in general, I think too. But to come at something like a new technology and to just play around with it and sort of impart your own ideas about how you might be able to utilize it is really valuable. So when you go to do some work for the course and any work that you're going to do in your own time as well, really do take the time to kind of mess around and just figure things out, because you can come to some really interesting conclusions, ones that you may not expect necessarily, but that's sort of half the joy of it, I think. Oops. Yeah. Where are we?
Actually overcome. It was at the time that Dean and Brannoc Whetter made that Spider-Verse short, and I set off on a personal quest to use this Holmes our way through this and engineer a solution to this flickering problem. And the first clue was Jurassic Park. 6 months ago, a user on YouTube named Hops uploaded an experiment. He had processed Jurassic Park to look like low poly Zelda. And he used an interesting new technique to noisify the image, and he had achieved excellent results. So I'll explain.
And note the difference too in just 6 months between that first attempt and what people are able to do at the minute. And think again about 6 months from now, like how quickly this stuff is progressing because people are passionate and driven to kind of work through it.
Every time you process an image, the noise that you put on top changes. Therefore, the forms in the image get changed every frame. If we freeze that noise, things become a lot more solid in the image, but now it kind of feels like the image is moving underneath a weird warp layer, and the details stay consistent. So the new trick used in that little Jurassic Park video is simple. If we can turn noise into an image, let's just reverse the image back into the noise it would have come from. Literally just do it backwards. Therefore, the noise is no longer randomly changing every frame, nor is it locked. If the two frames are nearly the same, so is the fuzzy, noised up versions. Therefore, they get interpreted in a similar way. So we had one piece to the puzzle solved. No more random noise on our image. But I tried to make my video look like a cartoon, and every frame was being drawn with a different cartoon style. So we fixed one problem just to encounter another problem. Dead end? Well, no. Because around this time, style models were becoming a thing in the stable diffusion space. A person named NitroSock started creating some amazing diffusion models built to convert your image into one specific style. So then it dawned on us. This was the key to eliminating the style flicker. Like imagine telling 100 different people to draw a cartoon dog. You're going to get 100 different dogs back. Now imagine giving everyone a character style sheet saying, draw a cartoon dog exactly like this. The images are going to look a lot more similar. So we had to train our own model, specifically on only one style that we wanted to replicate. Another big step forward, but it only uncovered another new problem.
And something interesting on the whole training a model to create a style. A lot of the models being created at the minute are being trained on pre-existing artwork. And again, that's where some of this issues about copyright ownership and stuff comes in. But there's nothing to stop you from using the technology to train a model on your own designs and artwork as well. There's a lot of interesting stuff that you can do by running through your own sort of styles and teaching the artificial intelligence what that kind of looks like, and using it to either reduce the time it takes for you to do certain more menial work, or use it to kind of give yourself a concept base to start a new piece on, for example. But yeah, there's a lot you can do, and don't feel like you're limited to anything that's pre-existing if you want to look further into it and train stuff off of your own work, for example. I keep hitting spacebar and it's changing the slide.
Different dogs back. Now imagine giving everyone a character, one style that we wanted to replicate. Another big step forward, but it only uncovered another new problem. On tests I performed on myself, the features on the face were still changing and jumping all over the place. So the idea hit us. We made a video where we trained ourselves into a diffusion model so that we could tell an epic fantasy story. Why not do that here? I trained a model to not only replicate a specific style, but also specifically know a character, me. I trained it on images of me wearing the same clothes on the same green screen background that I was using for my test sequence. And suddenly, boom, everything locked. The consistency between frames was hugely improved. Well, almost. It still wasn't quite perfect. But we're VFX artists who have worked with crappy video files. Surely, we must have a tool in our arsenal to deal with light flickering. So we applied the deflicker plugin in DaVinci Resolve, and we set it to remove flickering light. It was that simple. Suddenly, we were there. It was working. We had a consistent movie, emotive, cartoon character. And it was all just driven with video of us on the green screen.
I think we've cracked a workflow here for getting something that looks like a cartoon, and it's pretty bonkers.
It's working, you know. I think we could do maybe a couple more experiments, but it's like ready to rock.
I think Nico has figured out the key to creating a consistent character.
Now, it was time to make that anime that I've always wanted to make. Because as you've seen on the channel, we have our anime. There's anime fidget spinners, anime self-driving cars, anime baseball, but they're all filmed for real because we don't run an animation studio, and it's very hard to do so these days. So I've had this idea forever. Anime. Rock, paper, scissors. What is the ultimate rock, paper, scissors game? Two twin princes, born at the same time, equal claim to the throne. It must be decided that day to decide. Rock, paper, scissors must happen. So we wrote this short film. The next step is to treat it like a cartoon, which means recording the dialogue first.
So Nico, who are you playing? I'm playing Flip, and I have no idea what voice I'm going to use. I figured that we would start in the same thing.
Yeah, just go through a few lines, and then we'll throw a filter or two on it to help nail the vibe.
My character is Jules. My research here, I just remember the shot of Clint in here screaming into a microphone. I'm just going to channel Clint today. Nico has said that you whisper and then you scream, and there's no in between.
Full dynamics. You go really quiet and you get really loud, and you do full volume compensation on there, so it just sounds like somehow you have this incredible presence where even your quietest moments are as loud as your screams.
So Dean and I, we did the voice acting first, and we just blew out our vocal cords, yelling as loud as we could. So after we did that, we then designed the costumes for each character. Basically just went on Etsy and bought some goofy clothes.
Well, look at this high-level costuming here. Oh no, we lost like half the tape. What we're trying to do is, you see all these doodads here is not going to be great for the anime style, because this kind of intricate detail wouldn't be included in the illustrations, because it would just be more pencil mileage for the animators. So we're covering all that up with a color that's similar to the rest of the costume. Once this is put into the animation space, all this jank gets covered up with beautiful illustrated lines.
What we did on the green screen was basically imagine that we were puppets, right? We were puppeteering a cartoon character, so we're posing like a cartoon character, and we're not doing any audio recording. Instead, the audio is already recorded, like a real cartoon. And we're out there just going...
We're basically just puppets.
Because, once again, we're trying to treat it like a cartoon. So there's a specific way we had to film this. We're basically gathering assets. So we're gathering paper cutouts, and we're going to then pose in our comic book. A lot of these shots are just us standing in a position, and we just need a single frame. Because a lot of animation is just single frames of characters standing there against the background while you hear dialogue. And there's a couple rules that we've discovered that we have to follow for this. So first and foremost, the style that we're matching, it basically has single direction light. It's not like you have characters that are painted with beautiful edge light and a key light and a fill light in a different direction for underlight. Like, to actually have to paint that stuff onto a cell would be a lot of work. And so a lot of cartoons don't do that. They just stick to a basic light tone to dark tone shading system at most. And oftentimes it's just a single paint color. At the end of the day, we get to take risks. We get to try things that might break it. Because, boy, look,
giant crew we have. Oh wait, we have like 2 people and an actor, right? It's like in Hollywood you have 100 people on set doing a big movie. So we don't need a costume department, we don't need a makeup department, we don't need a crazy camera department. And now we're just making it very, very simple and very, very straightforward, just focusing on the concept. Sam and I spent a lot of time conceptualizing these shots because at the end of the day, anime is just really all about tying your visual language to the story and really getting into there, stylizing it, thinking about things metaphorically, all that kind of stuff. Once again, it's your ideas that matter, right? It's your direction, your story. Because the AI takes the rest away. I love it. It's such an awesome way to work.
Hey guys, so we are commemorating the launch of this anime rock, paper, scissors video with an awesome limited edition shirt. It's only available for the next 7 days.
I think the key thing to take away from just that last few comments there was the idea that the concept and the storytelling is probably the most important part. You know, you could use AI to produce work for you, but if you don't have a strong concept or a background or a reason for what you're producing, then why fucking do it?
Yeah.
There's no point. And I think that comes across in. I know there's been a lot of backlash in with this particular video, with people saying that these guys are basically stealing animators' roles, and you know, sort of deflating an industry in some ways. But as an illustrator and designer myself, I kind of felt like that to start with, but now I'm not thinking like it anymore. The concept is there, the work's gone into making the characters believable and worthwhile, and the development that they've done in the background brings the whole storytelling together. I think it works. Sorry.
Super cool. It's designed by human. And once again, it's 7 days only. These are limited editions, so snag one right now.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning too that the Corridor Digital guys have had decades of experience as artists previously. They've gone through all of the changes in technology and implemented it as things have come up. You know, they've been involved pretty heavily, and also I believe on their Corridor Crew channel they recently did a so that they do some videos where they do like breakdowns of visual effects and things. And their newest one, they sat down with a couple of Disney animator twins. Brothers, actually, I'm not sure if they're twins, but Disney animator brothers, and kind of did a presentation of their video to them. So I think I can probably send that video as well. I don't have it in the presentation slides at the minute.
Cool.
But essentially they kind of had this perspective that they were both extremely excited and also a little bit saddened by the opportunities and what the kind of changes that AI has for the industry mean. But they were generally pretty positive about just how much you can do with the technology. So again, these are 2 big names. Like the first guy was a director of, I can't remember which film, but you know, they worked on like Aladdin and some other of those sort of real, classic kind of Disney films. So they were quite a relevant kind of insight from that space of artist.
Little tip here, come over here. So subscription, like, just saying.
Float that we came up with that let us do 120 effect shots for this piece. So here's a video of me on a green screen, in costume, doing all the acting with the lip sync, right? So what we want to do is we want to have the AI basically trace it in a cartoon style. So we need to train a model to both know what I look like, as well as what style we want to apply.
It's kind of like a faster rotoscoping method, essentially.
My face, my body, different poses, full body shots, pictures of my back, lighting, a picture of Nico Barringer. Hey, there I am doing like a weird Fonzie playing. So then we went and we took a bunch of frames from Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, which is an anime that came out in the year 2000. It's actually free on YouTube. You can just go watch it if you want to. It's actually pretty cool. And we tried to grab frames of like different people.
And so this is where a lot of people who had negative comments about the work had an issue, is because they're saying that they're essentially stealing the artwork that the original Vampire Hunter D artists had drawn to use for their imagery. But again, as Nico says, like he's been like fully transparent about the fact that this is what he used as a source for it, as well as the fact that it's already essentially abandoned and is available entirely free to watch on YouTube as well. So a thing that I kind of look back to as far as this notion of like theft of art in AI is that, and again, it's a difficult kind of topic to discuss and kind of verbalize, but the way I look at it is, what's the difference between an AI, right, which is taking these images of different characters and kind of getting a general understanding of the style. So like I mentioned earlier, it's not holding these images in storage and it's like copy pasting sections of them. It's looking at them and interpreting the meaning of it, and the flow of the lines and the kind of way that detailing and shadow and lighting is used. What's the difference between that and the way that we as humans will look at this kind of artwork and use it as a reference? If we were to, say, draw an animation frame using Vampire Hunter D as a reference, you would kind of go through, you'd look at them, you'd look at these details, how they've got the eyes drawn, how they've gone about detailing clothing and the folds and things. That's essentially the same way that the AI kind of works, by processing that information. So it's just interesting to think about, as far as it's not straight copying the work, it's interpreting the style and kind of generating its own images based off of that notion.
Full face shots, torso shots, full body shots, hands, hair, even some abstract things like flowers. Because with all these different objects, each picture is effectively being a different object, different character. So when we train the model, it's not going to learn any single subject. Instead, it's going to learn the style in which all of these subjects were drawn. One fun little thing here. If you look at the Vampire Hunter D data set, you'll notice there's no characters with full beards, because there aren't any characters with full beards in the movie. And this was a problem, actually, when we first made the model, and I tried to represent me. Sometimes I'd have a mustache, sometimes I'd have mutton chops, it'd be all over the place. So I generated a bunch of pictures of me. Some of them looked good, most of them didn't. But I took the good ones, and I re-added them back into the data set, and trained the model one more time on a new one. Be comparing her to the style of Vampire Hunter D. There it is. It's me, as an anime man. And notice it's got the costume details correct, it's got my face details correct, my beard. It's the same character every single time. At least consistent enough every single frame. So we got the model done, and now we can use this for all the shots.
So I've just received a fantastic plate from Nico. What I'm going to do now is take the individual images, and we're going to run each one through Stable Diffusion to get an animated character. You have our positive prompts, which are Vamp Hunt D, aesthetic, style, cell animation of Nico Herringer, man, beard, profile, fist, hand. But we also have this negative prompt section, which can steer us away from certain things, like detailed, intricate, lazy eye, photography, render, CGI. These are all the things that we want to avoid coming out. And then basically, there's a bunch of freaking sliders, and it's really boring, and there's all that stuff that Nico goes into way more depth over on corridorvisual.com, because we don't want to bog
Yes, they've got more details and a breakdown online as well. But with the amount of things like sliders and different parameters and things that you can change, even in just the generation phase, outside of everything else that's been worked on, there's still a ton of creative control about how you manage what the outputs are going to feature and generally be like. And that's something you can kind of, for example, with animation, you can tweak on 1 or 2 frames and then be set with the parameters that you want to kind of maintain that throughout the process. Keep pressing spacebar.
in sliders, and it's really boring, and there's all that stuff that Nico goes in. The output is this. There is a really cool animated frame of Nico. There is actually an
I will also say, one thing I've been playing around with a little bit, I haven't done too much on yet, but they're filming on green screen, right, for their images here. If you don't have access to a green screen, that's not necessarily a complete barrier or limitation, because with ControlNet, they've got this depth mapping that you can do. You can actually set the parameters for how deep the background is. So you can use ControlNet with the depth map, put in your initial image, and set parameters so that you can actually generate the background to be green in Stable Diffusion, and then use that as a green screen if you want to. So there's a lot of this kind of wacky ways that you can use the technology to reach the outcome that you're looking for. You just have to think about it kind of tangentially to how you might think about sort of other processes.
goes into way more depth over on corridordigital.com because we don't want to bog process, and the output is actually an interpretive element to what the AI is doing. There's blue shading on the fur on his shoulders and basically two-tone shading in his face. It's a really incredible process that we've gotten way too used to at this point. We kind of forget how crazy this technology is. So what's great is that we can just now run the entire image sequence with this prompt and these settings. It's working really well. But, you know, there's a few janky frames, like his head just pops in for a second and then pops back out. Little inconsistencies, but they only exist on a single frame basis. You know, if only there was a way to kind of remove a little bit of this flicker and smooth out this sequence into a nice, consistent character.
All right, so Dean's giving me this whole image sequence now. Let's check it out. Not bad. It's a little flickery, but like it's consistent, right? You can see the character, you can see some of the mouth moving. All right, so we take the shot and pop it over the Fusion here and it's all. So the next thing we need to add is the deflicker. There's two different modes, one for time lapse and one for fluorescent lights. And if you turn on the fluorescent light deflicker, check out the difference. Much better. And if it's not good enough, here's how I fix it. Copy, paste, 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 paste. So now we have all these deflickers turned on. Look how stable my face and my costume are. The next step is just to pull a green screen key and remove the background. And then finally, reduce the frame rate from 24 frames per second to 12 to look a little bit more like animation and remove even more of that flickering feeling. Now that we have an anime man, we need an anime world for him to live in. That's where Sam comes in.
So very early on in the process, we're thinking, how do we get consistency in each one? We want one environment, one location. So using an environment in Unreal Engine as the foundation for everything. And just like the video, how we're taking a video still frame and then applying a style to that, I'm taking a render from Unreal and applying a style to that. That allows us to have consistency. You can go close up, you can do wide angles, all the same objects in the scene stay consistent. Here's our cathedral here. I think it was called the Gothic Interior Mega Pack. The moment I saw this screenshot of this environment on the marketplace, I made it perfect. I've done a little tweaking, redone some of the lighting, little modifications here and there to make it vibe a little bit better. It is just bleeding with sweet, intricate, detailed Gothic style, and it's just right for taking cool pictures of. I have a camera player for every shot piece. If you go back out here, look at that. Look at all of these cameras. Every single one of these cameras is a different angle for different background placement. So shot 250, waist up shot, maybe some more here-ish. Yeah, there we go. So I'm not even going to render these out like the normal renderer. I'm literally just going to take screenshots of this stuff. So screenshot, boop. All right, it's a whip pan, so let's pan over, boop, pan over, boop, and maybe one more just for kicks. Boop. All right, so now I've got 4 images. Stable Diffusion kind of takes it from there. Let's go to my handy dandy prompt sheet of all the different little prompts I've tried out. I believe this one right here, expressive oil painting, dark beautiful Gothic cathedral interior, hyper detailed brush strokes, expressive Japanese 1990s anime movie background, oil painting. Negative prompts, blurry. All set, let's take a look. All right, so that's basically what the process looks like for all these background plates. Now that these background plates are processed, the shot has everything it needs to get composited.
Basically in anime, there's no 3D movies. It's all either painted backgrounds or cell animated characters. So we wanted to stay true to that. So for these shots, we have a script that was created by Nico that has everything we need. It's got lens distortion, it's got glows, it's got light rays, it's got all this cool stuff. Basically we just drop our foreground, our background, and the final output is pretty close to what you want. And you just go in and animate little things and add a little bit of flourish. Here you can see I have the backgrounds that Sam made, and I actually just went into Photoshop and blended them together so you can see the edges kind of smoothed out. We took those backgrounds and I just literally animated them scrolling past. And so you can see as well we've added some directional blur, some lens blur, and then we land on these 2 windows and do a final little push in. So once we drop Nico on top of that, you can see there's this very dynamic effect that's achieved just by literally moving to the images behind him. On top of that, we have this cool plugin technique called light rays, which creates these beautiful rays of light, and we're using the plate of Nico to actually obscure those rays. So it really marries Nico to the environment. What we're also adding to emphasize this motion, we took some of the 3D elements of the candelabras from the Unreal scene, we isolated them, and we also turned them into kind of animated candelabras. So you can see here, as the camera's moving, you just whip the candelabra by as if it's in the foreground to kind of emphasize the idea that the camera is literally orbiting around in classic anime fashion to really emphasize the motion, bring in these speed lines. Right here at the end, we have a couple more anime lines to emphasize the point, because that's a very important character moment. It's challenging my character. So all of that together,
and again, like he talks about, they're thinking about all of these points, like the character moments and things, in the process, right? The Stable Diffusion process isn't doing these creative decisions for them. They're simply using that as a step to save them time and effort on reaching this animated style and allowing them to spend more time reaching these kind of creative decisions and yeah, how they kind of want the final visual to look.
And then the final piece are these glows, which kind of emulate a film camera, because that's how anime used to be shot back in the days. Animation cells would be filmed through a film camera, so we try to emulate these glows. And after all that, you get a sweet shot that I can send back to Nico, and you can drop it right in the edit.
One thing I want to talk about is the democratization of this process. This is a situation here where we're looking at a piece of software that's free, that anyone has access to. A process here that we're sharing openly with everyone, because everyone's openly sharing knowledge with us, with everyone. And the way this technology is developing, I want to be able to create really cool things. But the only way I can create really cool things is with the help of other people, helping make the technology to create those really cool things. And so, since we've learned and are utilizing an open source program with a lot of contributions of people, I want to give back and I want to contribute our knowledge and put it out there so that you can go and make animations and people can experiment and improve upon the process, helping all of us get better. So in this video, I'm trying to make a point of really going through the process in the way it's interesting, but I'm not necessarily getting to a click-by-click tutorial. For those of you who want that, we actually have that on our website.
Yeah, so again, this kind of notion that all of the work that they're doing has been inspired and helped by other people in the industry, and people that are just passionate about it, developing technology that they're able to use, and then they can show how they use that technology to help the people that are developing it to kind of focus in on where certain aspects might be falling down and where they can kind of focus their interests, for example.
I think the key thing out of this particular video, that I'm not, and Brand's kind of gone through it without going through every single phase of it, is the concept is key.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. It doesn't matter whether it's this studio or whether it's your other areas of study that you're engaged in. Is that oftentimes when you're presented with something, a brief to design to, you tend to focus on the wording in the brief rather than the concept that could come from understanding or interpreting the wording in the brief, if that makes sense. So it's kind of, I like the idea of concept being key, being something that is delivering a story that you want to tell through your work. It doesn't have to be animation, it can be flat work, it can be photography, it can be whatever it is. A photograph of something that you've thought about is a photograph you've created. A photograph you've just taken a snap of without looking through the camera. You could argue is kind of, in some ways, a bit like AI. It's there, but why was it made? So concept is key, I think, is something that you should take away from some of the stuff that Brand's presented today.
Yeah, and again, the fact that as the creative, you're ultimately in control of what you're generating and producing and how you reach a final outcome that you are happy to share with other people, essentially.
What do we think about copyright in terms of this particular animation? If AI has generated all this stuff, who owns the copyright to it? Or is there any copyright to it? If I took that picture and made a t-shirt and sold it on Etsy, would I get in trouble?
Why? You're nodding, so why? Yeah, you're nodding. Yeah. I can see you nodding, saying yes, he's going to get into trouble. So why is he going to get into trouble?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's because someone else made it.
But they're made with AI. And I'm just going back to the copyright thing you were saying before, that in Australia anyway, because the AI Like, what did the AI make, I guess, is the question, and where's the copyright? I tend to think I shouldn't do it and get in trouble, but would they claim copyright on it?
I think that enough individual work has been done by them to make it more than just the work of an AI though.
Sure.
Because it's like a
Yes.
bunch
Yeah,
of
exactly,
works of
yeah.
AI. I think they would own it.
So the key word there is transformative. The easiest way for me, going through all this process and thinking about this as a designer from old, Andy Warhol drawing the Campbell soup can is completely transformative. It's not the can, it doesn't have soup in it, it's not the product,
soup, yeah.
he ain't selling soup. So as far as you look at it on that level, that is not a derivative work, it is a transformative work, therefore he outright owns the IP. Outright. So this is where this is going to start to challenge what happens with AI, and there's a guild or something been set up in Europe now through the European Union.
Pushing for some AI regulation. I'm not fully agreeing with some of the points that they're making because I think they're a bit too limiting. But yeah, there is people that are trying to push for both sides to kind of open up for freedom of use and to make sure that people that are involved are not getting impacted financially or as far as their intellectual property goes as badly as they may otherwise be.
That'll look great on the t-shirt.
But yeah, so like the way that I kind of look at it is like if I go back to this video is pretty much finished, but you can go back and watch it as well. But if I go quickly back to the Endless Engines one that I did, right? So in this clip, right, everything that I've done to this point is fully made and developed by me in Blender manually. There's nothing else that has been anyone else's intellectual property, right? This section where I've generated imagery in Stable Diffusion, I've used some names such as H.R. Geiger, for example, and a couple of other pre-existing IPs. I think I used Scorn, which is a horror video game, as a reference. So I brought in these styles as far as the prompting is concerned from existing names. But looking at this, you wouldn't necessarily say that it looks like H.R. Geiger, for example. It's kind of got a horror tone to it, but it's not necessarily how he would have finished a piece, for example. But as far as like IP and copyright for something like this, everything that I've used as a basis was mine. The generation, I played around with the parameters to reach something that I chose as what I kind of wanted the final style to look like. I generated using features from the original artworks that I had made, right? So you can see the forms of the creature and the background is being directly manipulated by what my initial imagery was. So as for all intents and purposes, for something like this, I believe I've maintained IP ownership of it. If you just generated an image on Midjourney with one prompt, that's all you did. And that final piece from Midjourney would not be held in your IP or in the IP of the AI generator either. It's essentially IP-less for the time being. So yeah, it's as far as you creating something with artificial intelligence, as long as you're sufficiently transforming either what the generation is based on your input or sufficiently transforming a generation's output after the fact. So for example, in the case of Corridor Digital guys, they're doing a bit of both. They're doing all of this post-compositing, adding the animation lines and things. That's all work that they're doing to the generation after the fact. Then they maintain IP, to my understanding of it anyway. So as long as you're putting in work before or after, then it's reasonable to say that you're the IP holder of that work.
I was going to say as well, because do you know how much it would, do you happen to know how much? Because obviously the Stable Diffusion, we're talking about how they're being sued.
Yep.
So like the main, I think, ethical thing is the whole underlying ethics of their data set.
Yep.
And how that would affect maybe that idea of whether or not it is your copyright.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's an incredibly big problem that's difficult to kind of come to a conclusion on. For sure, content that is in that Lion dataset, so again, that's a huge dataset scraping most of the internet. So they used Lion 5B here, so it's nearly 6 billion different images that they've used. And you can actually go on and search that dataset and find all of the images that are available on that dataset as well, and the source, like what website they came from.
If you train your own model though, is it still technically using?
The difficulty there is if you're using Stable Diffusion and then training a model on top of that, all of the concepts that were initially trained are still using that Lion dataset, but then you're additionally adding whatever you're training on top of that, right? So it's not, you're using that as a foundation and building on top of it. It is technically possible to build a Stable Diffusion equivalent yourself with only your data set and none of this extra stuff. But that's sort of a whole other, like, yeah, that's full like data science kind of side of things. So it is possible to kind of build your own one completely void of anyone else's work. Bit of extra effort on that front though. So if you're training on top of Stable Diffusion, that's still using this pre-existing data set.
That uses Stable Diffusion, the copyright comes because they've stolen or whatever, used all these base images in that initial data set.
So the issue as far as copyright and IP ownership is kind of comes down to the usage of the imagery. So all of the images that's been scraped by Lion are publicly accessible images, so they're available on websites like ArtStation and whatever that people can go to and view themselves. So it's already got sort of a public accessibility standpoint to it, right? Well, so hang on, I've just lost my train of thought on that a little bit. So yeah, there's this pre-existing data that is available to everybody to view. So the question comes up with, if we as humans are able to view this imagery and looking at sort of the general technology behind how artificial intelligence learns about the imagery and defines what the characteristics of the images are, that's essentially sort of the same as how we as humans do it, right? You wouldn't necessarily say that it's going against someone's copyright if you take a look at this person's imagery and then do something in a similar style to it, because it's your own work that you're ultimately doing, unless you're doing something like tracing it directly, for example. The way I've kind of been looking at it for the time being is that standard sort of copyright law would hold up, where if you generate something, as long as it's sufficiently different from any existing artwork that someone else has created, then that's okay. If you generate, for example, the Mona Lisa, I know the Mona Lisa's probably out of copyright now actually, but if you generate the Mona Lisa and it just looks like the Mona Lisa, right? That would be whoever would initially hold the copyright would also hold the copyright for that image. So as long as what you're generating is sufficiently different enough and hence transformative, then that's, to me, is not as big of an issue as some people are trying to argue it to be.
And another quick question. So with Stable Diffusion, it doesn't actually have these images built in. It's like
no,
it has the understanding of what a cat in a beret.
Yes, exactly. So
I don't understand what a cat in a beret is.
So yeah, so this data set, like I said earlier, is 240 terabytes of actual like image data, right? So that is holding the initial images that people have drawn and uploaded onto the internet. The Stable Diffusion model is only 5 gigabytes, significantly smaller, and it's because it's not holding any of these images in it. It's not copy pasting sections. It's just using it to know a concept, which is kind of hard to wrap your head around a little bit. But
so the copyright is, does someone have copyright over a concept?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why it's difficult, because this idea of no one can hold a copyright to a concept. You can't copyright a cat in general, right? So yeah, there's a lot of interesting discussion coming up as far as what is allowed to be owned by somebody, essentially. So yeah, it's worth going through some of these videos again in your own time, just kind of getting a clearer understanding of
What
some of them. And so I've got sort of last couple of slides to just go through here. So this idea of genericism and loss of inspiration with AI, it's a bit of an issue that a lot of people bring up as far as all AI art looks the same, or you know, there's these kind of pre-existing styles that people like to use, like with Greg Rutkowski, for an example again. A lot of the work being generated with his name in it has this kind of very similar style because that's what it interprets Greg Rutkowski as a concept to be like. So because people are using the same models, the same prompts, you can end up having generic and kind of overly similar results. And because of that, you'll get boring sort of outcomes and people will lose inspiration from it, right? So that's only an issue as far as people will put up with things being the same, right? I mean, I don't think that's very long as humans, right? We're going to go, oh, I'm kind of sick of this, I'll do something else. And so we, alongside with the AI, will end up continuing to sort of create inspiring and innovative content. And so yeah, genericism can be circumvented by enhanced artistic input from the user, you know, how we choose to manipulate or change what the generation will be. And using more dynamic prompts or wording that other people might not have used in their prompting. And there's this also a notion of self-devaluing of AI, right? So because AI is generating a lot of these sort of generic results, and people that are not necessarily artists are using AI to kind of pump stuff out, right? And so this is the thing that people have been talking about as far as the value of AI as opposed to an artist. Eventually, and it's already kind of happening, AI results are devaluing themselves because they're no longer unique or interesting, right? Even if all the work is actually like it looks really nice, if it's all the same, right, people are not going to care about it so much, and its usefulness and impact in broader society decreases, right? So if we go back to something like revenue again, for an example, just because it's a bit more concrete, if every corporation is using the same AI to generate their promotional imagery, all of the companies are going to look the same. They're going to have the same brand image, same brand identity and presence online. And so they're all going to just drop in revenue. They're not going to sell as much stuff because the guy on Instagram scrolling through is going to go, oh, this is the same shit I don't care about. So artists are always going to be relevant to the products that they're making, right? Like being able to input creativity into this space is always going to be relevant for whatever the outcome is. So yeah, it's about putting your own touch into the work that you're doing, and you're going to avoid all of the issues of genericism and loss of inspiration because you as the person will be the one inspiring, and it's just utilizing the tool of AI within that. And this is just an interesting point on hallucination. So in artificial intelligence, a hallucination or artificial hallucination is a confident response by an AI that does not seem to be justified by its training data. So this can be present in things like ChatGPT, for example, where it might incorrectly calculate a mathematical equation, or it'll just falsely say some statistic that's completely incorrect.
Penguin neuron, you might recall.
So yeah, it can be wrong, and it often is. So you know, if you're using things like ChatGPT, it's worth fact-checking it before using it in anything final. But you know, it is still incredibly valuable and continues to improve in capabilities as new generations come out. And then you've got something like with Stable Diffusion, it can hallucinate by misinterpreting keywords in a prompt, or kind of how it understands a concept might actually be sidestepped or incorrect from how we as a human would understand that same concept. So it can generate things that are not necessarily what we are expecting it to generate. With that said, it can be used to kind of create weird and interesting stuff, and this idea of accidental imagery where playing around with like edge cases can actually kind of reach more interesting ideas that we might not have thought about ourselves, which I think is really interesting. And the final thing I just wanted to mention is this idea of real feelings and digital tools. So even with regards to AI, our feelings and emotions are real, right? There's this idea of sort of trusting our gut, and we call on our instincts and our brain simply disregards the noise to give us this kind of clean solution. Bit of a tie into Stable Diffusion on that But if we look at things like video games and movies, right, we get immersed in experiencing them. We kind of, the feelings that we have as part of that are real, but whatever the game is or the movie, or even a book, that's an artificial middle ground, right? But despite that, it's a human on either side. There's a human creating something artificial for another human on the other end to experience. So human-to-human interaction is, at the end of the day, fundamental to all of it. But there's this kind of mid-ground intermediary space of using artificial features to reach those kind of real emotions and feelings. So I've just got an example there. Like I personally really enjoy games that are quite sort of challenging and have genuine threats. So like whether it's a loss of time or loss of like in-game equipment. And also things that are like quite competitive. So I'm sort of into like esporty style games. So you know, we like physiologically react to this stuff, right? Like when I was playing Counter-Strike recently, like I got a 1v5 situation where I'm versing this whole team by myself. And you know, I managed to get through, kill everybody and catch the victory, right? That's really rewarding and kind of gives you this like real adrenaline reaction. And this is through playing a video game. Artificial, it's not real, but you know, the emotions and physiological experiences that you have are real. So yeah, everything that we do, no matter how or what we're doing, impacts how we experience in general. So yeah, it's human to human, and the artificial middle ground doesn't change the fact that it's real experiences. So yeah, feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions or anything. Happy to chat and talk about it. Yeah, that's the end of the presentation.
For anyone who wants to have a quick chinwag with Brown about ControlNet or Stable Diffusion, setups, playing with it, what the tools kind of do a little bit more in depth, he will be available after our lunch break.
Yep, happy to talk about any of that stuff
So
and run through
anything that you want to
setup
ask,
stuff.
anything that you heard in there that you think you would like a little bit more info on, Brown will be able to help you out. Thank you, mate.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you, everyone.